It started subtly, a cough, a fever, then the news reports, hushed whispers of a new virus, something aggressive, something different. Dismissed as another flu strain at first, it quickly tightened its grip on humanity. It had now been 6 months since the world was thrust into chaos. No one could have predicted such a cataclysmic event, and the cause is still shrouded in mystery. Society as we knew it crumbled and fell apart. In this new world, the dead no longer stayed dead. Instead, they reanimated and roamed the streets with a hunger for flesh. The living were forced to adapt quickly or perish at the hands of these ravenous creatures. Amidst the ruins of Nashville, a small group of unlikely companions had banded together for survival. A mix of soldiers, law enforcement officers, farmers, outcasts, and even a retired scientist had clung to each other in hopes of escaping the city as it was being overrun by the undead. Their only chance lay in a rugged truck driver's promise of safe passage out of this nightmare. They piled into his dilapidated six-wheeler and headed down Interstate 75 towards Atlanta, their last known hope for sanctuary. As the truck made its way through the calm dead of night, they all looked at each other and wondered who they were and what they had become. Harrison Steele, 38. Harrison's tumultuous past as a soldier in Afghanistan continues to haunt him. The traumatic events he witnessed left emotional scars, making it difficult to adjust to civilian life. His loving girlfriend Sarah was his beacon of hope, helping him cope with the darkness. But when the apocalypse struck, Harrison lost Sarah to the walkers, shattering his world. He is quiet and withdrawn, but when he speaks, it's usually worth listening to. Trevor Butler, 46. Trevor's life was shattered during the Nashville evacuation. He watched in horror as walkers brutally devoured his wife, Janelle, right before his eyes. The chaos separated him from his young son, Toby, fueling Trevor's relentless search. Consumed by guilt and grief, Trevor vows to find Toby, driven by a promise to his dying wife to protect and care for the child. Peter Holland, 42. Peter fled Clarksville, Tennessee as the city crumbled around him. He sought refuge in a small community but faced hostility and rejection due to his sexuality. Peter's fragile sense of self was shattered, leaving him feeling isolated and vulnerable. He went solo for a short time until meeting up with Kylie Othey, before eventually ending up in Nashville. Kylie Othey, 24. Kylie's resilience was forged in the fire of desperation. Alone and adrift, she survived the initial outbreak on a tour bus lost in the wilderness, eventually making her way to Nashville. Very attractive, but that's part of her undoing. Meeting Peter in Nashville brought a sense of calm to her troubled life, being one outcast to another. Carl Gustav, 39. Carl Gustav's military training prepared him for combat, but the apocalypse pushed him to his limits. Haunted by the memories of fallen comrades, initially he traveled solo, seeking redemption. The group offers a chance to rebuild and protect others, possibly redeeming his troubled past. Bob Brown, 38. Bob's idyllic farm life was destroyed by walkers, leaving him with nothing. Joining a small group, he found new purpose in helping others survive. He's looking for a chance to rebuild and start anew. Milton Nordberg, 35. Milton's law enforcement background instills a strong sense of duty. Reunited with Trevor in Nashville, Milton is driven to help his colleague find Toby. His past experiences have hardened him, but his determination remains unwavering. Harry Tagilla, 40. He's a cop that went crooked, and it's well documented. He was prosecuted and convicted of fraud and selling drugs to gang associates. Not the most likable guy. Never gives up, but seldom follows orders and is a bit of a troublemaker. Hard to believe he's a cop. Bobby Valente, 50. Honest man of the land who believes he has a higher purpose on this earth and is sworn to help those in need. He's one of the few shining lights in this shitty world. Helmut Blut, 64. Born in Wolfsburg, Germany, the son of a German SS officer who served during World War II. He tells stories of his father's recollection of the atrocities. His father was a cruel and macabre man who hunted and would often kill animals in a brutal way in front of him. His mother died when he was only 6, and he believes it was his father, but was always too frightened to confront him. Worked as a scientist for the government in a bio-lab until his retirement a few years before the outbreak. That was their party, their group, their family. Alone in a world that hated them, a world where they have done and must still do unspeakable things to survive. It had been over 2 hours now, and the group had finally managed to settle into the journey. No one knew how much longer. 3, maybe 4 hours. Traveling now is hard, as the roads are littered with vehicles and other obstacles. No sooner had they gotten comfortable, the massive truck seemed to tilt as it navigated a sharp turn on the mountain roads, its tires screaming in protest before finally losing their grip. The truck flipped violently onto its side, metal screeching against stones and gravel, as it slid down a steep embankment with unstoppable force, killing the driver instantly. The impact of the accident sent the players sprawling, each taking a point of stress. As they regained their bearings and exited the rear of the vehicle, they noticed a young couple standing by a car about 25 meters away. The couple, Sid and Nancy, were apologizing profusely for causing the crash. They explained that they had been trying to flag down the driver for help when he spotted them late in the dark and then veered off course. Sid was visibly ill, with a high fever and pale, sweaty skin. Despite multiple medical checks, the players couldn't determine if he had been bitten and was slowly turning or just unwell. Nancy was in even worse condition, showing signs of an imminent birth or miscarriage. Medical checks proved inconclusive again. The players decided to make a makeshift bed for the couple in the back of their truck and promised to check on them later. However, before they could do much else, the driver of the truck who had died in the accident suddenly rose and attacked them. A violent struggle ensued, and eventually the group managed to bludgeon him to death. Some 20 minutes had passed, and the sun began to rise over the hills. With the morning light improving their visibility, a successful scout check enabled the players to see a sign welcoming them to Blue Ridge, Georgia, population of 1,250. Another successful scout check revealed a cabin nearby where someone had attempted to barricade themselves inside. The players cautiously approached to investigate. As they approached the cabin, they noticed several elk and deer pelts hanging outside and a rusted bear trap chained to a tree. The area had been fortified with wooden barricades, most likely to keep out the undead. Despite their efforts, there were still gaps big enough for humans to slip through. The group decided to break into the cabin in search of food and shelter. As they entered, they noticed even more pelts hanging from the walls and only a few days' worth of rations left behind. They also stumbled upon an old CB radio station in need of repair and some basic hunting and fishing gear. While searching the cabin, they heard a noise coming from beneath the floorboards. With careful inspection, they found a trapdoor in the center of the room. Preparing for a potential fight, they opened the door to find a man lying inside. He introduced himself as Archer McCormick, owner of the cabin, and explained that he had come here with his family to seek refuge from the outbreak. Sadly, both his wife and son had succumbed to the undead soon after their arrival. Despite his rugged appearance and the scars that told of a difficult past, Archer exuded kindness and a sense of survival. As he emerged from his hiding spot, he offered the group shelter in his small cabin until they could get back on their feet. With impressive tech skills from his days as a radar technician, the party felt Archer could prove to be a valuable member of the group. His masterful rating in tech would enable him to fix and maintain high-level equipment with ease. He also possessed impressive hunting abilities, able to track and bring down game using his crossbow with expert precision. After some convincing, through a successful manipulation check, the group was able to persuade Archer to join them on their journey, grateful for his expertise and companionship. The group gathered around a table, their voices low and urgent as they discussed their situation. With only a meager supply of tinned food and basic hunting gear, their haven was far from secure, but it was water that posed the biggest threat to their survival. Carl Gustav's eyes flashed with determination as he spoke up. "We need to prioritize setting up a running water system." Archer then told Carl about a water treatment facility some 200 meters through the forest. He added that he had already laid down a rubber pipeline from there to his cabin before his family were killed. The pain in his voice was raw, but just as the group started to feel a glimmer of hope, Carl interjected with a grim question. "Why didn't you finish the job? You seem pretty capable." Archer's jaw tightened as he revealed the truth. "While I was at the facility, I encountered a massive bear, a man-killer. It had been tearing through people down there for weeks. I had to leave the job unfinished, and my crossbow wouldn't have been enough to take that beast down." The room fell silent, the weight of their predicament heavy on their shoulders. Water was essential for survival, but so was staying alive in the face of such danger. Archer looked up and said, "Before it was just me with a crossbow, now there are many of us, and some of you have guns. This is now doable." The group agreed. It was still mid-morning, so they decided to go immediately to the water filtration plant and connect the water supply. During their journey to the plant, they stumbled upon an abandoned campsite. The scene was one of utter destruction and complete carnage. Tattered tents lay in ruins, gear scattered about chaotically, and multiple corpses lay mutilated and ripped apart. One had its head completely torn off, another was missing both legs, and a third had been almost entirely consumed in a gruesome manner. As terrifying as the violence of humanity was in this new world, it paled in comparison to the savagery of nature. This bear was no ordinary creature. It was a monster, wreaking havoc on anything that crossed its path. It had to be put down. All of a sudden, the dense forest seemed to come alive at the sound of a phenomenal force. The trees rustled and growled in unison as if warning the party of an impending danger. Suddenly, a massive bear charged out of the foliage, bellowing fiercely. Archer's crossbow shot missed its mark, provoking the beast even more. With lightning speed, the bear lunged at Archer, swiping its razor-sharp claws across his chest and shoulder. Blood gushed from the wounds, leaving him battered and vulnerable. In a panicked frenzy, Carl Gustav fired his weapon, narrowly missing Archer and instead hitting Harrison's steel in the upper body. Archer valiantly fought with the ferocious bear, determined to protect himself and his companions, but succumbed to 2 points of damage. But it was Trevor Butler who delivered the final blow, ending the gruesome battle with a kill shot to the bear's head. As they surveyed their surroundings, the party couldn't help but feel shaken by the vicious attack and their injured comrades. They all take 1 point of stress. Gathering themselves together, they continued on their journey towards the treatment facility. The carcass of the mighty bear was divided into 12 rations for their group. From there, it was a simple matter of installing the filtration device and opening the water lines before returning to the cabin. The cabin was now habitable for up to 10 people. Archer pointed out they were now 11, so this was a short-term location at best, but it was a start. Gutsache and the party agreed to rest the night, talk it out, and de-stress. All members regained 1 point of damage overnight and used 1 ration each in doing so. The sun's feeble light crept through grimy windows, casting long shadows across the cabin's wooden floor. Harrison Steele's eyes snapped open, his hand instinctively reaching for the knife beside his sleeping bag. The nightmare clung to him like a shroud. Sarah's screams, the walker's gnashing teeth. He shook his head, willing the images away. Around him, the others stirred. Trevor's muffled sobs pierced the silence. The man never stopped grieving for his missing son. Harrison envied his hope, misplaced as it probably was. He thought to himself, what was there left to live for in this God-forsaken world? "Rise and shine, people!" Charlie Gutsake barked, his military bearing incongruous in their squalid surroundings. Time to earn our keep. Harrison hauled himself up, muscles protesting. His gaze fell on Archer, sprawled in the corner. The man's face was ashen, his bandages stained crimson. "How you holding up?" Harrison asked, crouching beside him. Archer's laugh was more of a wheeze. "Been better. That bear did a number on me." "We need medical supplies," Harrison muttered, more to himself than Archer. "There's a vet clinic in town," Archer offered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Might have some stuff out back. Gas station too, further up, across from a hardware store." Harrison nodded, his mind already mapping out their route. The thought of venturing into town sent a chill down his spine. How many walkers lurked in those streets? How many more innocents had been turned into monsters? "We'll check it out," he said, forcing confidence into his voice. "Get you patched up proper." Archer's eyes were already closing, exhaustion claiming him once more. Harrison stood, surveying the ragtag group around him. Survivors, all of them, but for how long? "Listen up," Gutsake called, drawing their attention. "We're heading into town, supply run. It'll be dangerous, but we need to risk it." Trevor's haunted eyes met his. What if Toby's there? Their hearts clenched. How could they crush the man's fragile hope? "We'll keep an eye out," Gutsake lied, hating himself for it. "But our priority is food and medical supplies. We stick together. We stay alert. No heroics." As the others gathered their meager gear, Harrison's gaze drifted to the cabin's darkened corners. For a moment he swore he saw Sarah's face, accusing and betrayed. He blinked and she was gone. The horrors that awaited them in town couldn't be worse than the demons that already haunted him. Or so he told himself as they stepped out into the morning sunlight. The town loomed before them, a desolate graveyard of civilization. Gutsake took the lead, his footsteps echoing hollowly on the cracked asphalt. Each abandoned storefront seemed to watch them with hungry, empty eyes. "Check those shops," he murmured, gesturing to a row of weathered buildings, "and stay close." They moved like ghosts through the silent streets, the stench of decay hanging thick in the air. Trevor's gaze darted frantically from window to window, searching for a ghost he'd never find. Inside a ransacked convenience store, Bobby's voice cut through the eerie silence. "Found some canned goods. Not much, but it's something." Harrison nodded, his own search yielding little more than dust and frustration. As he turned to leave, a glint caught his eye, a silver locket lying forgotten beneath shattered glass. For a moment Sarah's face flashed before him, her smile as radiant as the day he'd given her one similar. He took it and tucked it in his pocket. A guttural moan snapped him back to reality. "Walkers," Helmut's accented voice hissed from outside. They burst from the store to find a small horde shuffling towards them, drawn by their scent or sound. Harrison's muscles tensed, muscle memory from Afghanistan taking over. "Form up," Gutsake barked. "Backs to the wall. No guns unless you have to." The group fell into position, a well-oiled machine born of desperation. As the first walker lunged, Harrison's knife found its rotting skull with practiced precision. Beside him, Trevor fought with the ferocity of a man with nothing left to lose. "There's too many!" Bobby shouted, his usual optimism wavering. Harrison's mind raced. They couldn't afford to waste bullets, couldn't risk drawing more. His gaze landed on a nearby alley. "Pull back!" Gutsake ordered. "We'll try to bottleneck them." As they retreated, Harrison caught a glimpse of Helmut. The old German's eyes gleamed with an unsettling excitement, his machete slicing through undead flesh with almost gleeful efficiency. Harrison shuddered, wondering what horrors the man's past held to make this carnage seem so familiar. The alley provided temporary refuge, but they all knew they couldn't linger. "We need to get back," Gutsake panted. "Regroup, come up with a new plan." As they caught their breath, Trevor's anguished whisper cut through the momentary quiet. "I never even got a chance to look for Toby." Bobby placed a hand on the grieving father's shoulder, feeling the weight of his own lies. "We'll come back," he promised, knowing full well the chances grew slimmer by the day. "We'll find him." Bobby's lie tasted like ashes in his mouth as they slipped away, leaving the hungry dead to prowl the streets of a town that held no salvation. The crumbling facade of an abandoned office building loomed before them, its windows like hollow eyes staring into the abyss of a world long dead. Harrison's fingers tightened around his rifle as they approached, memories of Afghan ruins flickering at the edges of his consciousness. "We should check it," Gustav muttered, his voice low and gravelly. "Might be supplies." Harrison nodded, swallowing the bile that rose in his throat. Every building was a potential death trap, every door a gateway to hell. But they had no choice. As they crept inside, the stale air reeked of decay and forgotten dreams. Harrison's eyes adjusted to the gloom, scanning for movement. A shuffling sound from a nearby cubicle sent adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Contact!" he hissed, raising his weapon. But instead of the grotesque visage of the undead, a haggard man emerged, hands raised in surrender. "Don't shoot," he pleaded, his voice cracking. I'm human." Harrison lowered his rifle, studying the newcomer warily. "Who are you?" "Anthony Stark," the man replied, his eyes darting nervously between the group. I am a scientist from Atlanta, got separated from my convoy." Helmut stepped forward, his cold gaze boring into Anthony. "A scientist, you say? How convenient." Harrison felt a chill run down his spine. There was something in Helmut's tone, a hunger that went beyond mere suspicion. "We should take him with us," Trevor interjected, a hint of desperate hope in his voice. "He might know something about a cure." Before Harrison could respond, a blood-curdling scream pierced the air. "Help! Help!" Without thinking, Harrison bolted towards the sound. Anthony and Helmut close behind. They burst through the doors of a veterinary clinic across the street, the stench of death assaulting their senses. In the back, a man in a blood-stained coat was cornered, fending off a group of undead with nothing but a plank of wood. Harrison's world narrowed to a pinpoint of focus as he raised his weapon, muscle memory taking over. The crack of gunfire filled the air as they mowed down the walkers. Harrison watched in morbid fascination as Helmut waded into the fray, his machete flashing with surgical precision. The old German's face was a mask of eerie calm, as if this dance of death was as natural to him as breathing. When the last walker fell, the rescued man slumped against the wall, panting heavily. "Thank you," he gasped. "I'm Darrell Chesterton, a doctor from Sugar Hill." As Darrell explained about the lack of medical supplies and the equipment in the surgery, Harrison's mind wandered. He thought of Sarah, of the life they'd dreamed of before the world ended. He wondered if she would recognize the man he'd become, hands stained with blood and soul weighted by impossible choices. "If you ever need help," Darrell was saying, "come to Sugar Hill. I owe you my life." Harrison nodded mechanically, the words hollow in his ears. In this world, debts were paid in blood and promises were as fragile as the illusion of safety they clung to. As they prepared to leave, Helmut's eyes lingered on the medical equipment. "We should take it," he murmured. "It could be useful." Harrison caught the hungry glint in Helmut's eye and felt a chill of foreboding. What secrets did this scientist carry? And what horrors might Helmut's clinical curiosity unleash? With a heavy sigh, Harrison made his decision. "Load up what we can carry," he ordered. "We can come back for the surgical gear." The clop of hooves faded as Darrell disappeared into the mist-shrouded streets. Harrison led the group out the clinic's front, his nerves frayed and senses on high alert. As they rounded the corner, Gutsake's sharp intake of breath made Harrison's blood run cold. "Sniper," he whispered, gesturing to a weathered sign that read, "Sniper, stay away." Gutsake's combat instincts kicked in. "Cover now," he hissed, pressing his back against a crumbling wall. His mind raced, memories of Afghanistan overlapping with their grim reality. Helmut's eyes gleamed with an unsettling excitement. "Fascinating," he murmured. "The hunter becomes the hunted." "Shut it," Gutsake growled, scanning their surroundings. His gaze landed on a camouflaged military vehicle in the distance, swarmed by the undead. A faint hope flickered in his chest, quickly smothered by dread. Trevor pointed to a nearby hardware store. "Rope ladder. Might give us a vantage point." Harrison nodded, his throat tight. "You, me, Anthony, and Helmut. We go in quiet, understood?" As they crept through the store's shadowy interior, Harrison's thoughts drifted to Sarah. Would she approve of the man he'd become, making these brutal calculations for survival? Trevor's excited whisper snapped him back. "A megaphone! This could be useful!" Harrison's eyes met Trevor's, recognizing the desperate hope of a father still searching. He nodded grimly. "Grab it, we're heading up." As they ascended the creaking ladder, Harrison's heart pounded. What fresh hell awaited them on that rooftop, and how many more pieces of his humanity would he have to sacrifice before this nightmare ended? The rooftop's gritty surface crunched beneath their feet as Harrison crouched low, signaling the others to follow suit. A haunting melody drifted through the air, incongruously cheerful amidst the carnage below. "Is that Pearl Jam?" Trevor whispered, his brow furrowed in disbelief. Harrison nodded grimly. "Alive," he muttered, the irony not lost on him, "coming from the truck." They inched towards the roof's edge, the song growing clearer. Harrison's mind reeled, memories of concerts with friends threatening to overwhelm him. He pushed them down, focusing on the grotesque tableau before them. The military vehicle stood besieged, its rear doors rattling under the assault of countless grasping, rotting hands. The walkers' relentless moans provided a macabre counterpoint to Eddie Vedder's impassioned vocals. "Look," Anthony breathed, pointing. "Bodies everywhere." Harrison's gaze swept the blood-soaked street. Corpses lay strewn about, some crumpled behind makeshift barricades of oil drums, others sprawled in twisted poses of final, futile flight. "Got him, Himmel," Helmut murmured, a disturbing glint in his eye. "It's like a war zone, but worse." Trevor turned away, retching. Harrison placed a steadying hand on his shoulder, even as his own stomach churned. What the hell happened here? Harrison wondered aloud, his voice hoarse. Anthony shook his head. A last stand, maybe, or an ambush. The song faded, leaving only the insistent groans of the undead. In that moment of relative quiet, Harrison's thoughts turned dark. How long before they, too, ended up as nameless corpses in some godforsaken street? "We need to move," he said, pushing the morbid thoughts aside. "Figure out if there's anything worth salvaging down there." As they retreated from the edge, Harrison cast one last look at the grisly scene below. The world had become a slaughterhouse, and they were all just waiting their turn at the butcher's block. The creaking of weathered wood drew Harrison's attention. His eyes traced a rickety ladder bridge stretching from their rooftop to an adjacent building. The group tensed, weapons at the ready, but the bridge remained empty. "Over there," Trevor whispered, gesturing with his chin. Harrison's gaze followed, landing on a lone figure perched on the neighboring roof. A woman, her form hunched over a sniper rifle, its barrel trained on the chaos below. She seemed oblivious to their presence, lost in her deadly vigil. Trevor's face twisted with a mix of hope and desperation. "Maybe she's seen Toby," he muttered, more to himself than the others. Before anyone could stop him, he called out, "Hey, you there!" The woman whirled, her rifle swinging wildly. Trevor barely had time to duck as a shot cracked past his ear, close enough to feel the heat of its passage. "Fuck!" Harrison snarled, raising his own weapon. The others followed suit. a ragged volley peppering the sniper's position. The woman jerked and stumbled, clearly hit. Her eyes, wide with panic, darted between her attackers and a nearby backpack. With a burst of desperate energy, she lunged for the pack and scrambled across another wooden bridge. Harrison's finger tightened on the trigger. The shot echoed and the woman's body went limp, tumbling from the makeshift crossing. "I had to," Harrison muttered, his voice hollow. "She fired first." Trevor stared at the fallen sniper, his expression haunted. What if she knew something about Toby? Harrison felt the familiar weight of guilt settle in his chest. How many more lives would be lost in this hellish new world? How much more blood would stain his hands? "We can't think like that," he said, though the words rang hollow even to his own ears. "We did what we had to do." But as the group turned away from the grisly scene, Harrison couldn't shake the feeling that each death brought them one step closer to losing what remained of their humanity. They agreed to use the megaphone to lure the walkers to them, while Gutsake and Bobby sneak into position to take the truck. In part it seemed foolish, but maybe the universe was showing them a sign by allowing them to find it. Trevor's knuckles whitened around the megaphone, his eyes fixed on the writhing mass of undead below. The stench of decay wafted up, a grim reminder of their precarious position. He licked his cracked lips, tasting fear and desperation. "It's now or never," he rasped, raising the device to his mouth. "Ready?" The others nodded grimly. Trevor squeezed his eyes shut, took a deep breath, and unleashed an ungodly wail into the megaphone. The sound pierced the air, a siren call to the hungry dead. Below, Bobby Valente and Carl Gustav crouched behind a rusted-out car, watching as the sea of rotting flesh began to churn and shift. Bobby's hand instinctively tightened on his weapon, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. "This is madness," he whispered, more to himself than to Gustav. Carl's eyes gleamed with a mix of fear and determination. "Madness is all we have left, my friend." As the horde shambled towards the hardware store, drawn by Trevor's unholy chorus, Bobby and Gustav darted from cover to cover. Each step brought them closer to their goal and to potential doom. A lone walker, its milky eyes unseeing, stumbled into their path. Without hesitation, Bobby's machete cleaved through its skull, the wet crunch of bone turning his stomach. "I'm sorry," he murmured, even as he wrenched his blade free. "God forgive me." They reached the truck, a hulking military behemoth surrounded by the stench of death. Gustav's fingers flew over the engine, his curses a steady stream under his breath. "Distributor caps gone," he hissed. "Intentional sabotage." Bobby kept watch, his nerves fraying with each passing second. "Can you fix it?" Gutsake nodded grimly, reaching inside the engine as he replaced it back. "Stole a few cars as a kid. This is easy as pie, my friend." As Gustav worked, Bobby's mind wandered to darker places. How many more would they have to kill, living and dead alike, to survive this nightmare, and at what cost to their souls? The engine roared to life, a beacon of hope in the desolate street. Gutsake's triumphant grin faltered as he reached for the door handle, his instinct screaming a warning he couldn't quite place. "Bobby," he whispered, tension coiling in his gut. Something's not right. The world exploded into chaos. The truck's rear doors burst open with a metallic shriek, disgorging 4 wild-eyed strangers. Their weapons glinted in the sickly light. A constellation of death pointed at Bobby and Gustav. "Don't move," one of them snarled, his voice raw and desperate. They squinted against the daylight, pupils constricted to pinpricks after God knows how long in that metal coffin. Bobby's hand twitched towards his gun, but he froze. These weren't the undead, these were living, breathing humans. His sworn duty was to help those in need, wasn't it? But the muzzles trained on them told a different story. "We don't want trouble," Bobby said, his voice steady despite the thundering of his heart. "There's enough death out here already." Gustav tensed beside him, a coiled spring ready to unleash violence. Bobby silently prayed his friend wouldn't do anything rash. From the rooftop, Harrison's voice cut through Bobby's thoughts. "Get down!" The world slowed to a crawl. Bobby saw the finger of one stranger tightening on a trigger. He saw Gustav's eyes widen in realization. He saw the glint of sunlight on rifle barrels from above. Then came the staccato burst of gunfire, a lethal symphony. The strangers' bodies jerked and twisted, crimson blooming across their chests. They crumpled to the ground, their final expressions a mixture of surprise and anguish. As quickly as it began, it was over. 4 bodies lay motionless at Bobby's feet, their blood seeping into the cracked asphalt. "Dear God," Bobby whispered, bile rising in his throat. "What have we done?" Gustav's hand gripped his shoulder, steadying him. "We survived, my friend. That's all we can do now." But as Bobby stared at the lifeless faces before him, he wondered if survival alone was enough to keep a man's soul intact in this merciless world. Gustav's calloused hands gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white with tension. The truck's engine roared to life, a sudden beacon amidst the hellscape. Bobby braced himself as Gustav slammed the vehicle into reverse, the tires screeching against the blood-slicked asphalt. The truck lurched backward, plowing through the sea of undead. Rotting bodies crunched and squelched beneath the wheels, a grotesque soundtrack to their desperate escape. Bobby fought the urge to vomit as he watched limbs and torsos explode in gruesome fountains of putrid flesh. "Christ," Gustav muttered, his face a mask of grim determination. "It's like driving through a field of rotten melons." They careened across the street, leaving a trail of carnage in their wake. The hardware store loomed before them, a concrete island in a sea of death. Gustav brought the truck to a shuddering halt, mere inches from the building's facade. Above, Harrison's face appeared at the edge of the roof, his eyes wild with a mixture of relief and barely contained panic. "Move your asses!" he shouted, already lowering himself onto the truck's cab. Helmet followed, his movements surprisingly nimble for a man his age. Anthony hesitated, his gaze fixed on the writhing mass of undead below. "I can't," he whispered, paralyzed by fear. "I can't do this." Helmut gripped Anthony's arm, his voice low and urgent. "We don't have a choice. It's now or never. Now go." With a choked sob, Anthony allowed himself to be guided onto the truck's roof, but slips and falls onto the roof of the truck, taking 1 damage. The vehicle groaned under their combined weight, a metallic protest that set Bobby's nerves on edge. As Gustav gunned the engine once more, Bobby's eyes were drawn to the scene unfolding behind them. The 4 corpses they'd left in their wake were now surrounded by a frenzied horde. Decaying hands tore at flesh, ripping and shredding with inhuman fervor. Bobby watched in horror as one walker buried its face into a dead man's abdomen, emerging with strings of viscera hanging from its blackened teeth. "Don't look," Gustav said softly, noticing Bobby's transfixed stare. "There's nothing we can do for them now." Bobby turned away, his stomach churning. As they sped towards the relative safety of the cabin, he couldn't shake the image of those bodies being devoured. He wondered, not for the first time, if there was any hope left in this world of endless hunger and violence. Above them, Harrison's voice drifted down, barely audible over the engine's roar. "We did what we had to do," he said, though it wasn't clear if he was trying to convince the others or himself. It was time to go home. To be continued. Thank you for watching Acts 1 and 2 of our Walking Dead Road to Redemption campaign. At the end of Session 1, the players sent a number of NPCs out into the town and surrounding world to loot and look for supplies. On the body of one of the people in the truck, they found a wallet with the initials HB. Inside the wallet was $125. They also found 1 moonshine still, 10 potato plants, 1 average quality pistol, 1 Walker suit, advanced medical equipment in the vet clinic, and 12 rations. They acquired 1 military medical truck and 1 utility vehicle with trailer. Both have about half a tank of diesel. They met Darrell Chesterton, a highly skilled doctor from Sugar Hill. He owes them a favor for saving his life. The group had to focus on the following issues. Their cabin is now too small, and they only have 4 days' worth of rations. They need to find food and a new home. They found out that they need 3 electrical components to begin the repair of the CB radio. Harry Tagilla and Bobby Brown set up a potato plot with hope to generate enough potatoes to plant a field in the coming month. Archer McCormick made a full recovery and informed them of a diner he knew of down near the township of Elijah. The group decided that is where they should head in the next session. Bobby Valenti and Carl Gustav picked up a +1 to stealth skill for their incredible effort to navigate the horde undetected to the truck. Trevor Butler gained a +2 specialization when using his megaphone after using it to attract the horde. Harrison Steele is struggling mentally after killing 2 people. He wasn't comfortable in ambushing the people from the truck. Helmut Bluth, from one scientist to another, is weary of the new member Anthony Stark. Archer McCormick is indebted to Trevor for killing the bear. Trevor Butler is battling very hard with the search for Toby, his son. Bobby Valenti came through Session 1, Acts 1 and 2 unscathed. Hope you enjoyed it as much as we did playing it. Please feel free to like and subscribe if you'd like to see more of this type of content. Thank you.